Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Getting Into Information Security. I am your host, Eamon Elswa. So I want to step out of character for a second, just talk about why I started this podcast series. On a constant basis, I was getting asked, how do I get into the field? And, what do I need to do? The thing is, everybody's way into the field is different. And so by learning all the different ways that people have gotten into the field, I'm hoping that you will relate with at least one or more of my guests. That's the idea that we're trying to do here, right? Because there's so many different ways to get into the field and not necessarily a linear way as some other fields. I hope you benefit from this. Just let me know. Thanks. Today's guest is Matt Toth.
On my way out to Blackout this year, I watched Hackers on the Airplane, and it was freaking me out because I'm like, all of the attacks that they're doing, they're performing, they're talking about are real-world attacks that we're dealing with today still. Denial of service attacks, IoT attacks, right? That's a huge thing right now, the Internet of Things.
Matt is a senior security engineer at Splunk with over 20 years of experience in IT and a focus on cybersecurity. Working with the U.S. Department of Defense, he has led teams in cyber war simulations and has advised senior leadership on new attack vectors and threat actors. With a passion for security, Matt is deeply engaged with the community to educate and prepare the next generation of cyber warrior. We get into some deep and philosophical topics.
It doesn't hurt to get them. If you have the capacity, if you're going to be spending a crap load of money out of pocket, maybe then you can, wait on it. A lot of companies, they will say, oh, you're interested in this? You've already studied up on it? Yeah, we'll pay for the test. Go for it. Right? But I don't think they hurt. And I think it's hard for me when I see people saying, oh, well, don't go get these things. Because normally it's somebody who's been around the industry a long time. They don't see the value in it anymore because they've already established themselves. But from a straight up heyday getting hired, if you have the capacity, especially if a company's paying for it, knock it out of the park.
As well as some not so serious, but informative nonetheless. Kind of funny.
Their AI was a room full of analysts in the back of their shop just going through and doing things.
He also has a blog at hacktheplanet.org. Matt is one of my oldest Infosec friends and an all-around good guy. We covered what it means to be a sales engineer and how he got hired in the Infosec field. As always, if you benefited from this or any other show, please share and spread the word. If you have any questions for me or future guests, please leave a comment. Tweet me at Coffee with Eamon or email me at eamon@gettingintoinfosec.com. If you would like updates and pre-releases of upcoming episodes, sign up to my mailing list on gettingintoinfosec.com. Hi, Matt. Thanks for joining.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's always good to get together with your friends.
I agree. Yeah, thanks for making the time. So you are a senior sales engineer at Splunk. Maybe for my audience, maybe you could give them a little insight as to what the life of a sales engineer is.
Absolutely. Started at Splunk just about 5 months ago. I've been doing security sales engineer work for the last maybe 11 years now. Been doing IT for over 20. Started off as a little network support engineer, which meant I was thin enough and light enough to pull cables through the ceiling, but moved up and was working in security. And then I talk a lot, and I was at a startup and they're like, hey, can you help the sales guys? So I popped over there to start helping them out as a sales engineer. And I didn't know really what that meant at the time. What I found out is basically it's, you're still an engineer. You still have to be highly technical because you are the trusted voice for your company. When you go out and meet with customers, they look at the sales guy and they say, okay, I know he's here to close the deal, right? That's his job. The engineer is here to make sure that this fits my environment. They're kind of my advisor from the company side, right? They're going to help me make the right decision. And sometimes you do have to work with your sales team to say, this is not the right place for this, because the worst thing you can do is sell something that doesn't work, right? So your job is to understand the customer's environment, understand your solution, and then make sure that it's an actual fit. I've been pretty lucky. I think partially because I've made good decisions, but I've worked at organizations that you can fit the product in fairly easily into the customer's environment. There's a big need typically at the places I've worked. So I've had good success there. But again, it's that you're kind of the, I hate to say trusted advisor because that's a word that gets overused, but it really is I'm here, the customer trusts me to be here, and I'm going to make sure that when they're done, they're happy with the situation so that they never come back and say, hey, dude, you screwed me over.
Okay, I think the sales engineer position is often overlooked from the sales cycle and from just all angles. So you did mention that it is highly technical, and I'd like to maybe help illustrate for the audience like how technical you do have to become or you do have to be for this role, right? There is a misconception, and feel free to correct me, that, sales engineers are not really technical. So, I mean, there's nothing worse than buying a product that doesn't fit for your environment, or, buying the wrong license or whatever it is. So maybe you could go into the technicalities of like, how technical do you really have to be? I think you mentioned you even have to set up a POC this week. Is that right?
Sales engineers actually typically have to be the jack of all trades. You have to understand networking. You have to understand endpoints, and not just Windows. You have to understand Linux. You have to understand server environments. You have to understand how email works. You have to understand what new attacks are coming out from the security perspective, right? You always have to be updating your skill set. You have to know what's coming down the pipe for your customer, right? You can't just go in and say, well, I know my product and that's enough. You really have to have a really solid base knowledge. So when you go in and you're working with the customer and they say, well, hey, we're running Palo Alto firewalls with the Wildfire malware sandbox, right? And we're running Tanium. And what we want to do is we want to see what that looks like in your product. Working for Splunk, again, we are a big data tool. We gather all of the different logs, network data, anything with a 1 or 0. We put that together and then we help visualize it and correlate it. So, for example, something comes through like, hey, this is malware. We see the visualization in our tool, we flag it, but we want to work with Tanium. We're going to push that to Tanium and say, hey, now you go out and look across the entire environment and see if this hash is anywhere else in this network. So you have to be able to integrate products. You need to know, I think it's really, really helpful if you know any scripting, any programming at all. Some Python, or for those of us who've been around a while, Perl. It's kind of died off a bit. Anything like that. Because you're going to have to work to be able to integrate it. And you're going to have to be able to have that kind of architectural mindset, right? You're going to have to be able to look and go, oh, this is how you built it. This is how we have to fit. Because everybody's environment's different. Even when you think, okay, well, one bank's going to look like another bank, or one federal customer will look like another federal customer. They actually can be really, really unique. And so from a technical perspective, you have to have that solid base knowledge. And I think you have to have the passion to keep diving in, keep learning more, doing a lot of self-education. I know a lot of people in our industry like to use the word autodidact, right? I'm a self-taught person. But I think that you really kind of have to be. If you're not driven for it, you're going to fall behind very quickly, because it doesn't matter if you know your product. I mean, you have to know that. You have to know it in and out. But you have to know, at least to a healthy level, all the other products that are on the market in your space, at least, right? And then how those fit together. Working for Splunk, right? We work with everybody. Everybody can plug into Splunk, right? And so I have to understand firewalls. I have to understand other networking gear. I have to understand endpoints, like I mentioned, servers. What looks normal? Hey, why is this person who's never created an account before creating accounts? You have to kind of understand that and understand how to look for that, right?
Well, it's really key in a lot of security products in general, is that the security products are really going in an integral part of, say, the network or the infrastructure, right? So,
right.
Not only does a security engineer need to know, I mean, it basically encompasses, you're touching all these things, and all these different network and groups and different departments are hesitant or wondering, if your product can do the job, or if it...
Yeah, well, you have to make sure that it can actually perform in the real world, right? Because a company who shall not be named, I have not worked for them, was caught. It's an endpoint solution. They got caught during their demos, right, during their POCs, handing people, they're like, oh, look at this. Here's some data to run through it. No other vendor can catch this except for us. Come to find out, it was something they had written a signature for. Even though they say they don't use signatures, this organization does. And they had done that, and they'd handed out this false file. Luckily, somebody saw them, they're called them out on it. But it's really kind of sad how the industry can work that way. And so you because of the way you have to integrate with everything else in the environment, because you have to know those things, you also have to know your competitors. You have to know what they're going to do, how they're going to behave, and then be able to coach or teach them. Because that's a huge piece, is educating your customer. One of the briefs I'm giving this week is a threat intelligence brief. Here's all the bad things that are going on, right? So I had to go out and have to build this brief off of all of this collected data, correlate it together, and say, hey, here's cryptojacking is on the rise, significantly on the rise.
Yeah, it is.
And then knowing historically, well, where did that cryptojacking come from? Right? Well, it came from ransomware. Ransomware is still around. Where did ransomware came from? It came from scareware, right? Where you just get that little pop-up. You could hit the escape key. Most people don't know that they even have an escape key. You see that history, you know what's going on, and you can move forward. But I have to be able to educate my customer on that. And I have to be able to do reading on that. I have to constantly keep myself up on that to make sure that I can educate them. I mean, you're kind of that teacher, trusted advisor, all of those things together.
What's a typical week for you like?
I don't know if there's a typical week as a sales engineer, to be honest. Depending on who your customer is, you may travel a lot. I travel pretty regularly. So you're going to be doing your normal calls. You have to do a lot of sales calls because, again, you hold quota. You have to close business. You have to help your sales guys close business.
Okay.
You'll have customers that have already bought reaching out saying, hey, I have a question, because as much as you're not supposed to be the first line of support. Oftentimes there's like, hey, I'm seeing this. It's kind of weird. Have you ever seen this before? So kind of, again, responding to customers, guiding them through it. If it's more than just oh yeah, look here, you've got to solve, guiding them through the support process, monitoring the tickets, then getting in front of the customer, talking to them about what they need, building out environments for them, if you're building a POC, it's sometimes you're going to have to take your hardware in. Sometimes they're like, oh, we have VMs, but here's what we're going to build. Here's what you want to see, right? Because we've talked, you work with them through that process. What do they really want to get out of the solution? Because you're there to solve a problem, right? Hey, I have this problem. Can you help me solve that? And oftentimes it's only partially technical, right? You're going to help them build processes into their normal day-to-day. You're going to help them build playbooks to say, if you see X, here's how you respond to it, which may be outside of your solution. I think it's helping them tune that in, seeing how you can help them if making sure you can, or guiding them to a solution that could. But it's all over the map, right? Last week I was on the East Coast. This week I'm in Texas. Week after I'll probably be somewhere else. We're running a workshop at a industry conference in Utah the last week of September, and then going to a big user conference that Splunk runs, .conf every year. We're running to that, and so kind of that you're always going, right?
Yeah.
You get done with your day, and you're not really done with your day. Put the kids to bed, have dinner, sit down, and start reading. Okay, what did I miss today while I was doing email and while I was installing software and installing Kali on their VMs, because they're not used to running it. So you can simulate attack environments, things of that nature.
Yeah. How do you end up staying up to date on things?
I still use RSS and Twitter quite a bit. I'm a huge fan of RSS. Find a few different places that you can grab information from, and then just be diligent about keeping up on it. Twitter is also really beneficial. Again, in our industry, you have some great people that you can learn from. So
yeah,
seeing what they're talking about and where they're going. One of the things that we're seeing a lot of is people want to start doing threat hunting, where it's finding adversaries who've already penetrated their network, right? They've already broken through our defenses, and now we need to find them quickly. Because, the average length of a breach, I think we've got it down to like 180 days. I think is what the industry standard is now. But for a while, it was like over a year. It was like 400 days, I think, at one point, where the breach hadn't been detected. So one of the things I've been doing is making sure I have different groups that I'm monitoring, different Twitter handles, different organizations, sites, and just trying to make sure I know everything I can about what the industry is saying about threat hunting. Because it's kind of, it's kind of a buzzword, but I think it's a very useful way to detect those breaches that your standard security systems haven't found. It has a human element into it, so it's training people up. You just kind of have to keep diving in every day.
So one question I had about the sales engagement is, are you still engaged with the customer post-sales, or does that hand off to another team? Is it different at different companies? Like, because I used to see pre-sales engineers and post-sales engineers. Now it's just sales engineers. So maybe walk us through what the engagement cycle is like.
Yeah, and I think it has changed a bit, because as a pre-sales engineer, you're the face of the company to them, the technical face of the company to the customer. So previously, you'd have your pre-sales engineers, you'd go in. The salesperson I worked with a long time ago, who said technical sales is like dating dudes. And you go out, take them to dinner, make them like you, close the deal, and then you move on. And I was like, oh man, that's very dark, but it's kind of hilarious. But I think there was some of that where the mentality was, okay, you've closed the deal, now you move to your next deal. You have to get, maintain quota, you have to do these things. And then the post-sales engineers would come in and do the installation, do a lot of the training and things of that nature. But I think because you are the first person they've met, they're going to call you all the time. Hey, well, can you come do this? Can you come help with this? you're the trusted person. So even if a post-sales person comes in and you still see that with professional services, right? You build that in where you're going to have people who know the product inside and out come in, do all of the installation for the customer, do the training and things of that nature. But the pre-sales engineer still has to be engaged because you're who the customer trusts. You're who they bought from.
Right.
You're the one who sold it. And the sales guy can close the deal, but they trust you that this is going to work for them. And so I think you've seen that shift where it's definitely become a broader, you're not just a pre-sales engineer. You have to be able to do post-sales. You have to be able to do training. You have to be able to do those things. We use professional services, again, internal teams or contract teams, depending on who the customer is, what they want. And a lot of that goes into once the customer is kind of sold on the product, working with them on how they like to get it delivered. Because it's not cookie cutter. It'd be awesome if it was, but it's not. And so you have to go, okay, how do you want it installed? How many days do you need? Right? Let's look at your environment. How many systems are we going to be looking at? All of those things kind of go into it.
Yeah.
And so you kind of are almost a project manager also, right? Helping get it done. Because again, if the customer is not happy, you're going to hear about it. I mean, they're going to go right to Twitter. They're going to go to all their buddies. And every future sale is going to be much, much more difficult.
Yeah, you're responsible for making it work. So your face is on it. Yeah, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Would you say that what kind of personality does it take to be a sales engineer? Is it introverted, extroverted? I'm sure there's a lot of and then maybe a follow-up question is, what kind of person, would a sales engineer, like transitioning into a sales engineer, how does one become one, for example?
Yeah, I think you can get introverted people can do it. You just have to understand that you're going to be interfacing with people, right?
Would you say it's safe? Like it'd probably be a safer job for an introvert or like an introvert that is okay meeting people, like, because you're kind of on the wings of the account manager or the salesperson. So in a way, you don't have to, you're just kind of riding along. Wouldn't you say?
Yes and no. So I think it depends on your account rep, because I've worked with account reps who are like, you are here just to have me confirm things off of you. I will let you know when you need to speak. Like, you're not running this. And then I've been with others who are like, hey, I'm not going to make it to that meeting. Can you do the entire thing by yourself?
Oh, wow.
And you're like, yeah, I'm absolutely going to do that. Right. And so it's really comes down to your account rep's personality.
Okay.
Sales reps, I know some people have had bad experiences with them, but I've had great sales reps throughout my career. I mean, I've had a handful that were difficult to work with, but you figure out, okay, what type of person are they? What are they trying to get out of this? And then you blend your personality to them. You have to be a little bit of a chameleon in that way. I'm kind of an extroverted introvert. I enjoy people. Large crowds can make me a little bit anxious, but at the end of the day, I like to retreat into my hotel room or office just to recharge the batteries a bit. But I think from a personality perspective, I've met people who are pretty hardcore introverts who've been successful at it because they've been able to find a salesperson who matches them well.
That's really good to know.
I've worked with quite a few reps, but there's a handful that I've worked for extended periods of time because we blended really, really well. Their abilities and my ability were able to just kind of make it a very successful teaming. You have to understand that you're responsible for your own success. You can't hide because you do have a quota, right? You can't just sit back and be like, I'll close a few tickets. I'll do a little bit of this and everything will be great, right?
So it's a team effort on the quotas between you and the account manager, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Basically. He's driving, but you're kind of co-pilot.
Yep.
Navigator.
Absolutely. It's great, though, because if you have a good sales team, if you're working for an organization with a good solution, you can really push your pay up quite a bit. I think it helps if you're hungry, you have to want to close deals, right? You have to be passionate about technology. If you really don't like the technology you're working in, you're probably not going to sell it very well. If you don't want to close the deal, the customer will probably read that like, well, he doesn't even really want to be here, right? So I think that if you like making a lot of money, if you're okay being in front of people and you love technology and learning all the time, it's a great field. I've had opportunities to move out of it. I love this because again, I get to meet people. I get to solve problems. I get to touch a bunch of different technology. That's not just my own companies, right? I get to do all these different things. When you close the deal, like again, being a little bit competitive, when you get that win, it's a rush, right? I don't think it's necessarily for everybody, but I love it. I think that if you take it, if you enjoy getting out there, if you enjoy being technical, if you enjoy competing, and not necessarily competing, you don't have to be, competitive, but it's just,
And a lot of times you have the support, especially from a technical perspective, on the back end of some of the, you have access to the developers, you have access to some of the senior architects that have actually made the product. So it's not just you out there by yourself. You have this team behind you, right?
Absolutely. And it honestly is pretty cool because a lot of times if they're good developers, if they're good product managers, they understand that their paycheck depends on you closing that deal also, right? So a lot of times you can get a lot of access that you would not necessarily have had, except they understand, I need to help this guy because this deal turns the lights on at my house. It's a lot of fun. I've made a lot of good friends on the development side. I worked at Symantec for a while, and their threat intelligence team there is incredible. And being able to sit down with these guys, the analysts, and learn from them, it's a great experience. And I wouldn't have been able to get that if I wasn't in the role that I was.
So what are some of your thoughts on the security industry today? As you see it, you've been around for a while.
I think we're honestly moving forward. I think we've done a lot of work to fix some of the big issues, from trying to bring in more women. So Splunk had a Women in Technology conference just a few weeks ago that we sponsored out in the DC area. You see that at Black Hat and DEF CON, right? So at DEF CON, there was a Women, Wine, and Wisdom. It was 3 Ws. I'm assuming that's what it was, that IO Active put on, and we're seeing that grow. So we're seeing a lot of diversity coming in, which is really, really helpful because our adversaries have that. And so we need to be able to step up to the plate as well. I think we are learning quite a bit. I think we still rely a little bit too much on buzzwords. At Black Hat and DEF CON, machine learning and AI were everywhere. Try to chat with them. Okay, well, what type of machine learning are you doing, right? There was an organization that they were talking about we do all this AI. But come to find out, their AI was a room full of analysts in the back of their shop just going through and doing things, right? You're like, that's not AI. But it helps the market. And it's kind of sad, but we still struggle with that. But I think we're moving forward. I think people get called out a lot more quickly when they do things like that.
Have you noticed on LinkedIn the chatter from CISOs against sales reps, or just the resentment? It's like coming up all over. And so, I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think sometimes sales guys will hear a word, and they're like, "Oh, I love that word," and then that's the threat hunting. Wow, that sounds awesome, right? APT, ooh, advanced. Yeah, we stop APTs. We stop the advanced stuff. Artificial intelligence, right? I mean, we've all been hot on that since Terminator came out. Right?
Yeah.
We're like, Skynet's going to get us. I think that good salespeople understand when not to use the buzzword bingo, right? They understand not to use those. You still get a lot of folks who will come in and do that, but I think sometimes CISOs also get a little, if they get gotten burnt, it really burns them on, a little bit on the industry in general, right? Also because CISOs have, besides salespeople, they're probably one of the higher turnover jobs, right? If something goes bad, it doesn't matter if I was trying to stop it or not, or had budget to stop it. My head's the one that's going to roll, right? And so there's probably a little bit of the, hey, you burned me and it could cost me my job. So I'm going to be very unhappy at the industry at large.
Resentment, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And knowing that salesperson also got a pretty, could have got a big payday off it. It's one of the things I've learned is you don't show up in a super nice car to a sales deal. Silly little thing, but it's a little bit of industry there, a little bit of psychology. If you show up in a Porsche, people are going to go, and that's totally as a side note, I don't own a Porsche. I'm a sales engineer because I have a Suburban. But I've seen sales guys show up in a Porsche, and the customer's like, I'm not going to pay that. You obviously make too much money as it is, right? So the psychology of show up in the Honda Pilot, or so don't show up in a super nice car, because again, it's going to make them resent you a bit. They're going to go, well, this guy's getting paid a lot of money. He's asking me to hand him all this money.
It's funny. I think there was some sort of quote unquote wisdom somewhere that someone has mentioned for salespeople. It's like, oh, you got to drive a nice car so they think you're successful. And it's funny how you're saying that. It's kind of basically the opposite, from a client's perspective, right?
Don't show up in like a 1982 Honda Civic with like 3 wheels and a cardboard for your fourth, but
Fred Flintstone, going on the floor.
Exactly. I think we all had those cars when we were young.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Understand that perception is huge. When you show up, you need to look professional. You need to represent your company well, but you also need to understand that if you're flashing diamond rings, I think that you see that with sports, right? People resent some of these guys making this money, not because I don't have that, they have it. I'm going to resent it a little bit. So just be smart about it. I mean, you can drive a nice enough car.
Yeah, I think you said it best. Just be smart about it. And I think these tips could apply to anyone really in the professional field. Come appropriate for your audience, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, when you go to DEF CON, right, and you show up in a suit, people are going to be like, what the heck? Who's this dude? Right? You meet with a CEO, you show up in a suit. You don't come in flip-flops and a Hawaiian shirt, no matter how much you want to. And honestly, as a sales engineer, something you have to work with your sales team on is understand how they want you to represent it. Splunk is a very technical company. So one of the things that you'll see Splunk SEs oftentimes it's not, button down and blazer, and you got the Splunk polo. When you're running workshops, a lot of times they'll show up with Splunk t-shirts, the looking for trouble, finding your faults just like mom.
I love the shirts, by the way.
Oh yeah, I love them.
I was wearing one the other way. It says, "I see dead servers."
Oh yeah.
So
they're great, but that's part of that company's culture. And when I was at Symantec, that is not Symantec's culture. Their culture was very much you're going to show up in your button up and blazer because that's how you're representing them. When you're meeting with your audience, understand who they are, understand what they expect. Give it a little bit of thought, right? You don't have to spend hours on it, but just don't be like, oh, I just threw this on. It was laying next to my bed. What happened?
Yep.
I didn't close the deal. Weird.
Yeah. Or I had a big stain or whatever, just, wear deodorant. Yeah. As an engineer, if you're going from engineer to sales engineer. Anyway, I'm not going to dig in down to that.
We've all met those engineers.
Yeah. I think there's been plenty of jokes where, at the security conference when people aren't wearing deodorant. So
that's DEF CON. I mean, they have the 3-2-1 rule, right?
Yeah.
3 hours of sleep, 2 meals, 1 shower every day. And
you have to remind people about that. Yeah.
Exactly. The fact they have to make that rule is an issue.
Yeah. There you go. And now a message from our sponsor. Have you ever wanted to write that email when you were mad, but just didn't have the patience to wait until later when you were cool like you're supposed to? Have a habit of not reading your emails before sending them? Are you a little curt or too blunt in your wiki entries and security policy documents? Well, we have a solution for you. The Emotional Intelligence Keyboard. This handy keyboard automatically changes your perceived mood from hostile to gentle. It uses algorithms derived from past TED Talkers, Tony Robbins, and even Oprah. It also features an empathy knob. Turn the knob up when you want to relate even more to your audience. It's plug and play. You just need to type, and it will take care of all the niceness for you. So tell me, what's the first computer you ever had?
Commodore 64, I think, would be the first. It was we got it from one of my cousins. The one that I think that I actually probably did the most on, though, was an old Mac that my dad was able to bring home from work. And I was able to work. I mean, this is in the way back. I was able to work on that.
Do some basic on it.
Yeah, a little bit of programming. Mostly, admittedly, going. What is the least amount of effort I have to put in to get this game to work? Okay, got it working. Okay, now I have to go find this. Okay, I think my passion for computers. I was going to be an artist when I was younger. I loved comic books, still collect. I actually knew some folks in that industry, and I got a scholarship to an art college. And I had a mentor, and I think this is really important for all young people. Find mentors that you can trust that actually have yourself in your best interest in mind, who can help guide you and listen to them. I had just started in IT. I had been working at a telecom as an operator. I was 16, 17. Hung out with the IT guys. I'm like, hey. And so I moved over and they're like, hey, you want to work with us? Of course I want to work with you guys. So I moved over to there, and my mentor, we were chatting, and I was going to go to this college for art. He's like, you're a good artist, but you understand what you're going to make, right? He's like, you're already making at your job what you will make in art, right? Plus you're going to have all the student debt and all of these things. And I looked at it and I was like, okay. Chatted with some other folks. I'm like, you know what? I love computers. I started finding some crazy stuff. Like, oh, this is awesome. This is really fun. You start diving in. I'm like, and this is a career I can already start.
What age was that mentor?
17. So I was pretty lucky. I was able to start school at 4, so I was able to graduate by 17. Not because I was intelligent or anything like that, but just where the birthday fell in Virginia, they did, the cutoff was January 1st. So I was able to, even as a December baby, get in there. I started working, I kind of always worked. I think this is probably something I'm trying to work out of is I kind of identify as my profession, which isn't necessarily healthy.
What do you mean?
I work probably more than I should. My work-life balance is dictated more about my passion. Like Splunk is really cool about, hey, you know what? Your time is your time. But I love this. This is what I do. When I started in IT, as soon as I graduated high school and I was already doing IT, I jumped in. I was doing 100-hour weeks, just learning everything I could. I had an apartment with a blanket and a pillow. I didn't even have a mattress. I had my computer, and that was about it. I think I had a fold-out table that the computer sat on. Maybe it sat on my. I don't remember at this point. But like, I just basically spent all my time in the office, and then I would go home, shower, clean up, sleep for a bit, go back in. Part of it was I worked at a telco, so I had an incredibly fast internet at work. Right, this is still in dial-up days, so like you get to work and you're like, oh my goodness, it's glorious. I worked at a startup right after that they had showers and like full kitchen and all that. This is pre.com bust.
Yeah, that's pretty big for back then. Oh, pre-bust. Okay.
Pre-bust. Yeah, it was right before the bubble burst. It was if I remember right, they were the third to last company to go public before the bust, and so all those options I had were worth zero, like negative. And yeah, and so it's I was just working. I would work and just love it. It was fun, but I think this is something that I feel bad for a lot of people coming into the industry today. When I started, it was like, hey, just go fix this. Go punch down that network. Go solve it, right? Any means necessary. Hey, we're working with these solutions. You had to touch everything. I was a network support technician. Then I was a Windows NT engineer. I mean, that's Windows NT, the last stable version of Windows. Then I was a Linux admin. Then I was a CRM admin. I had to build a customer relationship management solution for the customer. I mean, this is pre-Salesforce, right? This is pre-Active Directory. And they're like, hey, this is your new project. Make this work. Okay, here's your title. Great. I'm going to put that on my title bingo card.
Is it all in the same company?
No. So it was over a few companies, but the first company was like network support, Windows. I think if I was a Windows engineer there or not, or if it was when I think I moved, and the company I moved to said, all of our people are engineers. And I'm like, oh, that sounds cool. That's awesome. I love that. I'm barely shaven, but I'm in. We did that. And then got the CRM built and running, and they're like, hey, we're going to move to Active Directory. Oh, right. Built that up. I remember doing Microsoft SMS, which was pre-SCCM, having it totally crash hard, having to rebuild it, get it working again. It's interesting. And then the .com bubble burst, and that was a network admin, a small company, Linux admin, a small company. Then again, you have to work. So I was a support guy at a telco again. And at that point, I was lucky enough to have a friend who was working at a security company, was able to pull me over. I was already passionate about security at that point, but being able to do it professionally was very nice. But I think something we all have to understand is you can't just sit there waiting for your dream job to show up, right? You have to be constantly mingling, finding other people in the industry. You get your jobs from people you know. If you're trying to break into Infosec, go to the meetups. So another OffSec fail, but I live out in Utah, right? And so we have a great DEF CON group out here, DC 801. So I moved out here. I started going to those meetups, started going to the local conferences, SaintCon, B-Sides, SLC, Pack West. Find the conferences, meet people. It's not always comfortable, even being a sales engineer. I mean, I've been doing this for a really long time. When I moved out here, I was like, oh man, this is going to be super awkward going and meeting, just going to a meetup and being like, hi, my name's Matt. I'm an InfoSec addict. Hi, Matt. But you do that, and all of a sudden people are like, hey, here are the jobs that are available. I mean, I already had a job at that point, but it's really cool to see that, right? But that's how you get your jobs. So don't be afraid to go out and mingle. If you don't know it, if you're just getting into the industry, recognize that all of us have our skill gaps. There is no one who knows everything, right? Jump in, start learning. People want to help. I like to mentor people. Most everyone I've met in the industry likes to mentor and likes to help because there's just not enough people. But if we can get somebody into the industry, we're like, oh, let's work off of my back. All right.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that there's something to be said about, I'm hearing over and over again, go to conferences, go to meetups, try to find something local. I think just the energy, wouldn't you say, is enough?
Right. And that's I think all anybody cares about is, are you passionate? And this is not to sound derogatory, but like I can teach almost anyone to do this if they care, right? It's not a hard job. People think that we're wizards. I gave a talk 2 years ago at a conference about changing the mentality of, hey, we're all cyber wizards into, we're just people who are doing a job. There's nothing magical about it. It's actually really easy if you've ever done any type of puzzle. It's just figuring out how the pieces fit together. And there are so many resources out there for it. I mean, there are just an incredible amount of free resources for you to learn. You just have to take the time to do it, right?
Definitely agreed. And oftentimes your first job might not be a security job necessarily, right? You might have to transition into security if you're not practicing security day by day and night, right?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's, you hit on that well. And I think this is where sometimes people want to put the cart before the horse. I think you really do need to work, be a network admin, be a system admin, work in a NOC. Understand how the system works so that when you become a security professional, you already know what the baseline is. You understand how things should look, right? When you get an open source tool like Wireshark or a free tool like Wireshark. I don't know if it's actually open source. I assume it is, but it's a free tool. It's a free tool that you can use, right? You understand what a network chatter is supposed to look like. So you can understand what you're trying to, okay, from a security mindset, this is deviating from that baseline, from that standard. Okay, now I can look at it. I think trying to jump directly in, and some people may be able to do it just, so passionate. And if that's your path, do it. I think it is helpful to have that background, though, in kind of general computing basics, your NAT plus, your A plus, whatever. You don't have to have those, but I'm just, that kind of foundational knowledge. And I could just be saying that because that's kind of how I came through it. But I think having that has definitely helped me in my career because I'm able to see things and go, that's weird.
The whole certs thing can be controversial sometimes. What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts with certs are, do you like to get paid? Right. And that may sound a little bit flippant. I think a lot of times the people who say, oh, you don't need those things are people who've already been in the industry for a while. They have a name, right? So the cert doesn't help them get hired because they already are established. When an HR person is looking at two different resumes, if one has certifications and the other does not, for the HR perspective, they're going to go with the person who has certifications. Maybe not, again, 100% that they're going to do that, but I've seen that's typically the way they go. You want to make a couple extra grand a year, get your CISSP. You want to, be able to touch a government computer, get your Sec Plus because they still have requirements. You have to have that to touch it. I think it doesn't hurt to get them. If you have the capacity, I mean, if you're going to be spending a crap load of money out of pocket, maybe then you can, wait on it. A lot of companies that will say, oh, you're interested in this? You've already studied up on it? Yeah, we'll pay for the test. Go for it. Right? I don't think they hurt. And I think that it's hard for me when I see people saying, oh, well, don't go get these things. Because normally it's somebody who's been around the industry a long time. They don't see the value in it anymore because they've already established themselves. But from a straight up payday getting hired, if you have the capacity, especially if a company's paying for it, knock it out of the park.
Yeah. Oh, especially if the company's paying out for it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, well, and just ask. One thing I think a lot of people have a hard time with, especially engineers, is asking, right? When I was at Symantec, I was a sales engineer, right? And I was like, hey, I bet I can pass the CEH. Will you pay for the test if I pass it? And they're like, go for it. So I went and I passed it, right? And it didn't hurt me, right? It didn't hurt me to ask. It's like, and people have seen it, and some people are like, again, the people who want to hate on certs, like, oh, these certs. I'm like, what? When I get hired, when people interview me, it goes towards my base. And that's where I think that if you have the ability to get them, get them. Don't think that you're not going to get a job because you have a specific cert. You may not get a job because you don't, though.
Well said. Well said. Cool, man. What's the first security conference you've ever been to?
I think I've been to some local meetups. I don't know if they qualify as conferences.
Yeah, I guess conference meetup. Like, what was the first meetup that you went to? First security related anything that you went to?
Security meetup that I was working at a company called Still Secure, and we had just brought someone in to help build our community. So we had built a security meetup in Denver. And so being the sales engineer, I was, tasked to go and mingle and drop my credit card, go to all that. But it was great. I loved it. From there, I have 11 years of of DEF CON on my wall now. My wife keeps telling me I need to build a shadow box to display all the badges out there.
I think you have an eclectic affinity for badges, wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah, I love badge life. And if you don't know what that is, go to Twitter and look up hashtag badge life. So like my first DEF CON badge, I was like, oh, sweet, it's incredible. I think it was last year they had all sorts of different badges, and I was just like, okay, now I'm in. I love. And I think it's the artwork that does it for me.
That's interesting.
I love the imagery that we can do, and some of these are just incredibly creative, right? I loved DEF CON. Was it 21, maybe 19? It was the one where they did it was just the metal circular badge with the Eye of Ra on it, right?
Eye of Ra, yeah.
Or Eye of Horus. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Eye of Ra on it. And they said numbers, and the crypto challenge with that. Like, oh, that's really, really cool. The crypto village badge from last year with the scarab, and had a little decoder ring built it, with a bunch of other things built into it, was just incredible looking. St. Con 2 years ago, they had a badge you had to build. You show up and you sit down at the table with your soldering gun and put it together. I was able to take one of my kids with me for that, and they soldered all the pieces on. It's just cool seeing how it works, but also the artwork behind it. I love a lot of the imagery we do, right? Mr. Robot, right? TV show that's, I love it. I'm like, that's an awesome story. Mm-hmm. I appreciate that they try to get things right. But even then, I remember watching Hackers, and maybe that was where things passed, it's at 97. I was like, oh, I love this. It's so cool. It's so funny. It's so, look at them, the rebels. But it's awesome. It's iconic, right? That soundtrack is still incredible. Honestly, I watched, on my way out to Black Hat this year, I watched Hackers on the Airplane, and it was freaking me out because I'm like, all of the attacks that they're doing, they're performing, they're talking about are real world attacks that we're dealing with today still. Denial of service attacks, IoT attacks, right? That's a huge thing right now. The Internet of Things. You'll hear people joke about it being the Internet of right? There's just so many insecure tools. But, in that movie, the boats were all automated. They were all Internet of Things, right? And they're being attacked. There's no manual override anymore. And you look at that with a lot of our infrastructure, right? As we start changing things, they're not securing it. They're just making it more manageable remotely. And sadly, sometimes you'll get adversaries managing it for you.
Yeah.
There's the goofiness about it. I love their reference to William Gibson. I'm a huge reader. And Gibson's one of my favorite authors. Neuromancer, the whole Sprawl trilogy, Cap Zero and Monthly Sober Driver, they help shape my imagination and my love for the industry. But it's fun, right? And I think sometimes people get too serious about things. I think it's usually the same people who get butthurt about certifications. But, it's like you have to be able to have fun with it, right? One of my, St. Con last year, Grifter, Neil Weiler, he works for RSA. He's a really, really nice guy, good security head. He had gone out to DerbyCon and got a cockroach in his in a shake that he had out there, and he had started. They named it Trevor. He had started this whole thing. You can still look it up. Hashtag Trevor Forget, right? And he's talking about this whole story at SingCon. I'm like, this is great. It doesn't have to necessarily be technical, but look at the industry. Look at some hilarious antics that happen. It's fun, right? And I think we still have to have fun with it. I think the industry is still young enough that we can still enjoy it and just have a good time and not have to take ourselves so seriously.
Yeah, I think that's pretty well said. We need to relax and be more, inviting, inclusive, and just kind of just relax a little bit. You got any interesting stories you can share with the audience?
Yeah. So early in my career, we had a guy that still shaped how I run commands in the command line. He was typing out a command to remove a directory on the Linux system, and he typed in rm space -rf space / directory.
No way.
And he wiped out the root directory as it's going down. And here in the alias on the email server as root loser.
Oh boy.
It was great. You're like, oh man, that every time I start typing in commands now, I'm like, okay, well, what is this really going to do? Right? Did I accidentally hit an extra space? Little things that shape your mind. Back at Symantec, we did a cyber war games internally that was absolutely incredible. And one of the early ones, you had to work your way through a nation state's infrastructure, eventually working your way into a hospital. And it was really it's kind of dark, but you had to write some malware, phishing email, get a nurse was a bot that would click on any link that in the email, but to click on it to download the malware, and eventually you had to kick somebody off of a heart transplant list because that was one of the things you were trying to do. But it started off with Facebook. We call it friend face because you can't say Facebook. Yeah, friend face. And through social engineering, open source intelligence, we were able to gather their information. They shared a password between that and one of their other systems. Okay, now we're able to, you start moving your way up. And it really helped with adversarial thinking. It's, what do I have out there that somebody else can use against me, right? Against my organization. It made you really want to make sure you're not reusing passwords anywhere. For everybody out there, go get a password manager. There's a lot of them out there. I don't care which one you use. Get a password manager, different password everywhere, auto-generated. So you don't even have to, doesn't have to be something you have to remember. Just click in and away you go.
Yeah.
And then I actually helped run a war game simulation for some federal customers. And we had a actual model about the size of a pool table of an oil field with oil pumps. If you've ever been out to the Midwest, you see the little pumps that look like sickles kind of going up and down, oil drums. And you were, again, attacking another nation state's oil infrastructure. And you had to work your way through these different levels. And the final thing you had to do was cause it to fail. And so log into their ICS system, change it. All of a sudden you see the kinetic effect, right, of the pump stopping and then the oil drum overflowing. And of course we use coffee because way easier to clean up and smells way better. But when we had executives from their organizations watching as their people were running through the simulation it was a contest. We had a number of teams there. And as they're going through it, wait, that only took them this long to pop. Yeah, there were some serious challenges, but you can get through it. And all of a sudden they hit that target and the executive's eyes open. They're like, oh my goodness, this is real. It's legitimate. And that was it was very cool to see that transpire, right? Get people to really understand it.
Do you ever walk into a client and find some sort of, incident, basically run into an incident as you're there? Because, you're oftentimes, yeah. What are do you have any funny stories along that?
I was at a customer site and I was doing, we were doing network access control. And they're like, we wanted to listen to what's going on in our environment. So just had the product listing on a tab, right, to the network traffic. And we're just collecting, and we're just basically, here's all the devices we're finding as they're chattering on your network. And they're like, hey, what's that domain there? I'm like, oh, it's another Windows domain. Like, but that one shouldn't exist. This is our only domain. I'm like, oh, well, and it was so we had built an entire other Windows domain in their environment.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was just people trying to do their jobs. That's most insider threats aren't malicious. They're just people trying to do their job and oftentimes working around the system to try to be more efficient, which is kind of sad. But
you mean it was a whole shadow IT, infrastructure built?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was entirely, it was one of those dolls, the Mark Kushner dolls, the Russian nesting dolls, where it was, an infrastructure inside their infrastructure that these people had built out to do their job. It's crazy when you see that. You're like, well, okay. And they're like, okay, well, you need to leave for a bit. Had another customer we were at, and we were doing working with data loss prevention. So we're like, hey, we're just, you want us to proof of concept, we're coming in, it's your data, you've given us access to this SharePoint. We're going to look at everybody who's touching everything, what they're doing.
Uh-oh.
Then we had I can't remember what the visualization is called, basically where it groups people by what they're doing, who they are, right? So here are all your network admin, okay? And they all behave kind of like this. And it helps you visualize outliers, right? It helps you look for those outliers. When there was somebody who was kind of way off the chart, like, oh, that's kind of weird. And they looked at the customer's like, oh, they start looking, they're like, you need to leave now. And the guy got arrested for doing things that he should not be doing anywhere. But it was interesting because as we're just doing this proof of concept, hey, look at all this stuff, look at this outlier. And to find out that the guy was doing something highly illegal, it's like, oh, well, the product works.
Wow. Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah. And I think it's not abnormal to find that because oftentimes the biggest issue people have is visibility into their own environment. It's something that at Splunk we work really, really hard to help people with is giving them that visibility.
You don't know what you don't know.
Exactly. The unknown unknowns, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's really my favorite phrase. It's so true. Oftentimes people are trying to fix something. I'm like, you can't fix something you don't know exists, right?
Exactly. Everybody has their known knowns. Here's what we do know, right? You look at any of the, and this is not to bash on anybody, when you're just going into somebody and you're like, well, what does your network look like? And they're like, well, this is all of our endpoints. You're like, okay, well, now you need to add at least 20% to that because there's going to be a ton of stuff that you don't know about in your environment. Oh, no, I know it's in my network, right? And you boot it up and they're like, oh, again, another Windows domain. You got an entire network infrastructure. It's incredible what you can find out there. And so part of my job is, again, to help people give people that visibility into, hey, this is your actual truth, right? The honest truth, what's going on in your environment. And sometimes honestly, I think sometimes companies don't want to buy it because they don't want to and not this, but there's certain times they'll see something and go, I don't want to know about that because if I know, I have to do something about that. And I don't have the ability or the manpower at this point to do it. So I'm just going to sit here with my head in the sand until the FBI comes knocking on my door saying, hey, you've been breached. I don't feel that I can solve it. And so as an industry, we were chatting a bit earlier about that, but as an industry, we really do need to become better at recognizing that we're not perfect. We're going to find bad things in our environment, and we need to take it head on, look at it and say, okay, I know that this is out there now. I'm aware of it. Now I can set a risk factor to it. I can say, is this actually an issue? And move forward and either mitigate it or at least document it so that I know what's going on.
I'm sure you've been in situations where you have people not willing to work with you or like giving you resistance. Do you have any funny stories along that line?
I don't know if any of them are actually funny. I've been in a number of situations where you've gone in and everybody has their kingdom, right? I'm the Windows admin. Everything in Windows is mine. Don't tell me my baby is ugly. Or I'm the network admin. Don't tell me my baby is ugly, right? And part of your job is helping them see that their baby has a beautiful soul. but helping them recognize, hey, it's okay that there's stuff wrong, right? It's okay. We will help you, and not just us. There are other people in the industry. We can help you solve this and help you get to a better level of security, help you get to a better baseline. Because a lot of you'll go in and be like, oh, I'm not going to use this. I had a customer who was using a competitor's, or I was in they had a competitor's product, and they're like, this was his product to support, and he got paid to support this product. So there was nothing that we could tell him because to him, we were taking his job.
Yeah, he felt threatened.
Exactly. They're taking their jobs. Sorry, a little South Park. Fun story. One of my managers actually went to college with those guys within their dorm or frat house or whatever. Yeah, he had some fun stories. But yeah, you go in and you have to help them understand, I'm going to make your job better. I'm going to make your job easier. I'm going to help you out. I'm not going to, just because it's easier doesn't mean that you're not going to still be able to do your 40 hours, right?
Yeah. Yeah. We're all on the same side, basically.
Exactly. And as a sales engineer, that's a lot of times who you have to connect with. You have to find the person who has the most resistance to change and connect with them and help them through that process.
Yeah. So what's your earliest hacking memory, if you have one?
So earliest memory, I had a friend who, there were some systems that he needed to access and he couldn't because he didn't know what he was doing. And not that he didn't know, he wasn't a computer guy. And he's like, I need to get access to this. And so I remember working backwards, gathering open source intelligence. Okay, how do I get this? How do I get into this system? What are possible attributes? It admittedly was a little bit of brute force, but it was educated brute force. Here's what should work. Okay. And then working your way through that. It was incredible when we actually got access. Like, oh my goodness, I did it. I made it. Yeah. And then just honestly, a lot of fun messing with people early on in IT, like popping into other people's systems, having fun with them.
Sending pop-ups on desktop.
Sending pop-ups. One of my buddies, I worked an overnight shift for a while. Again, you are not too good for any job. If you're coming into this, we've all worked crap jobs. I was working an overnight shift. I actually love that shift because I've learned so much. And me and one of my coworkers, who's a good friend of mine, because again, you spend a lot of time overnight with people, you become friends, or mortal enemies, but we became friends. he wrote this script. And it was hilarious. And it had a timer, but it was kind of randomized, and it would pop out. And this is, again, CD-ROMs, when people still had CD-ROMs in their systems.
You mean not the cup holder?
Exactly. It's not the cup holder. And he would, it would just randomly throughout the day open these different people's CD-ROM drives and then close it. And like, people would drive people be like, what is happening? What is going on? And it just made you chuckle. You're like, oh man, again, little light pranks don't hurt it. Yeah, it didn't hurt anybody. It wasn't like white people's drives, things like that.
Computer lab stories, man.
Oh yeah, you just have, teaching people that early VoIP wasn't encrypted. It's like, hey, this isn't encrypted. They're like, what do you mean? It's a digital phone call. It's great. Like, look, here's a hub. I'm going to plug the hub into this line. I'm going to record everything, and I'm going to play back your conversation. It's not encrypted. And then they'd be like, oh my goodness, we have to encrypt this. Yes, of course you do. And don't talk about those things when you're on the phone. That is an in-person conversation in a room
right,
with everything turned off.
And so you did all this before you got into information security officially, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. This was back. I mean, one of the jobs was when I was working at the telco as just a conference operator. One of the things we did, I had access to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of phone lines. And so you'd be like, hey, I bet I could blast dial this radio station and I'm going to get callers, 1 through 100. So I'm definitely caller 10. It's just scripting that, working on an old Wise terminal. I mean, all those things you do, and you don't think of it as hacking, but you're solving a problem. I mean, that's all hacking really is, right? It's solving a problem, finding the answer. And, I think it shapes you. It's having that passion, having that desire, having almost the glee at the little things, right? The fun. When Gen 2 Linux came out, this is again pre-2005, I think, maybe 2004, 2005. My overnight buddy was like, hey, we're going to start it at layer 1, which basically you're designing your Linux kernel, right, for your system. And you're going through and doing that. And you're like, oh man, I didn't even know any of this was here. I didn't know I could do any of this. And finding it out. I mean, I still remember so before it was Kali, it was Backtrace or Backtrack. Before Backtrack, I think it was the Auditor's Toolkit. Again, I'm old, and so my memory's not great. I still have a CD that I've kept just because me and my overnight buddy, we got the CD, ripped it, and then we put a CD, just a sticker on top of it, the sweet skull, right? Oh, this is our tough thing. Look at the tools this has. Look what you can do with this. But it was cool. It was like, oh, I'm going to find out how this works. I want to know how this works.
It's about the mindset. It's the mindset.
So just to reference Hollywood or whatever, Mr. Robot talks about it pretty well when he says the itch, right? The itch in his brain. You start working on something, you'll just trigger it, and you're like, what is that? I need to know how this works. And it's kind of going to the Matrix, right? Follow the white rabbit. You chase the rabbit, and you're like, what's going on here? And what started with a simple search or idea, all of a sudden you're, way off into the boonies, but you've learned a ton. It's fascinating how often those little things you've learned when you weren't intentionally trying to learn them, will save your butt someday in the future, because you're like, oh, I remember this. I'm going to work on that.
That's right. It'll at least give you context into what you're doing.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome, man. Well, I really appreciate it. I think this has been a wonderful conversation. Where can people find out more about you, either a blog or Twitter or LinkedIn or anything?
So LinkedIn, again, Matt Toth. I work at Splunk. It's probably pretty easy to find me there. At Twitter, I'm at Will Hack for Food, all spelled out. No fancy numbers or letters or anything else there. My blog, which does not get updated very often, is mostly just a writing practice for me to make sure I can still spell words. Is hacktheplanet.org. I've owned that since I've been shaped by media, and I'm okay with it because there's fun things. There's things to learn from it, right? We can all laugh at I think it was NCSI or NCSI where they two people typing, right? No, that's not how it works. But when you can take little things from it, little ideas, it can't be. It's not all bad.
Definitely with you on that one. Definitely with you. Anything else you want to share with the audience?
We run a lot of work. Splunk runs a lot of workshops. We do everything from just some 101 for our stuff to all the way to advanced APT threat hunting. We ran that at DEF CON and B-Sides Vegas this year. I'm going to be running a threat hunting 101 course coming up in a few weeks. So if you look in your industry, you look around your neighborhood, we run Splunk Live events where we'll be doing some of these contests. We do a blue team CTF, which is a lot of fun, called Boss of the SOC. And we run those, again, coast to coast. So you'll be able to find them, contact your local Splunk person, or just look online and see where we're going to be. There's a lot to learn, though. So go out and happy hacking.
Is there a URL that they could go to find out more information about that?
Yeah, Splunk.com. It's I know it sounds simple, but we have again our free versions right up there on the top right. Then there's also we have all of our social pieces there. All of the events we run are there. You'll find some of our security folks on Twitter, and they've written tons of things, threat hunting basics, all sorts of cool things that you can find on that site.
Awesome. Well, definitely appreciate your time. This has been great.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you having me on. Talk to you soon.
Hey, thanks for listening to the show. I hope you liked this week's Easter egg. I was really excited about it. If you've missed all my Easter eggs, well, go back. In each show, I have a spoof ad that I come up with every week. It makes me get these creative juices going. Again, yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. I know it's a little long, but these were one of my earlier recordings, and so trying to cut them down. But, sometimes there's just such good information coming out, so it's hard to decide what to keep and what not to keep. Thanks for listening to the show. We have some really exciting episodes coming up next week. Another friend of mine that has come out of the Marines talks about his path into information security, so keep on the lookout for that. And we have some others coming up. So a law enforcement official, also another one that does threat research and malware analysis. So some really fun recordings, some good episodes. And again, every week, me or my guest get to pick the outro music. And this week, it's some 8-bit music again by Trash80. It's called Cascadia. If you liked any part of this episode, please subscribe and share it with those that you think would benefit. Thanks. Bye.